What's up, Dragon Ball Super family? Allow me the privilege to be the first to welcome you to a brand new series on our channel called Promote Your Pawn. This series, being a passion project of mine, aims to improve your competitive gameplay in Dragon Ball Super Masters. For the first episode of this series, let's talk about side decking. First, we're going to talk about what a side deck is, then we'll practice some actual side decking, and then finally, we'll show some popular side deck choices for the current meta for each color. Let's get into it. In Dragon Ball Super Masters, your main deck contains 50 to 60 battle cards, unisons, and extra cards, plus one leader card. Your Z deck contains up to 10 Z cards, and most importantly to the competitive game, you can also equip yourself with 15 cards in your side deck. These cards must follow the deck building rules of the game, meaning you can't bring spare super combos, SCRs, or leaders in your side deck, but you can slot Z cards in your side deck if you'd like. The side deck is oftentimes one of the most overlooked components of the game, but it's what gives you the competitive edge, sometimes even fixing your bad matchups for you. Typically, at a major event, when you sit down for a match, you and your opponent will reveal your leaders to each other, and once the match timer begins, and before the die roll, you both have a couple minutes to swap some cards in from your side deck for an equal amount out of your main deck. Meaning, if 5 come in, 5 must go out. In events where there is a best of 3, you are able to do this between games 1 and 2, and then again between games 2 and 3. Practicing with your side deck is crucial for both being able to save some time during the start of the match and to enter your matchup confidently. In fact, throughout an official tournament, you are unlikely to ever play more games with your main deck than you will with your side deck. Given that I've been recently playing Son Goku face off with the Demon King, the perspective of this video will be from the eyes of this deck. However, the thought processes and the principles learned throughout this video can be applied to any deck in this game. Initially, you'll want to identify the core of your deck. By core, we mean cards that will not be removed from your deck, otherwise your deck will not function properly. These core cards typically, but not always, include your SCR, your Super Combo package, the tightest starter package you can think of if you play a starter package, and then core cards that make your deck function. In this deck, the skill lists are included in the core cards. 3 to 4 copies of the 5-drop are included as core cards, and then your Chaozu and Bulma for your free counterplay. This is what I consider core in the Son Goku face-off with the Demon King deck. Everything else can be changed out as you go on for side decking. For example, Videl might not be applicable in some slower matchups. Baby Unison may not be applicable versus matchups that have Barrier or Indestructible or remove your Unison quickly. A full playset of testing the opposition may not be applicable in matchups where your opponent is playing a control deck or they punish you for using extra cards. A full playset of Explosive Dance may not be applicable in matchups where your opponent is a control deck or they punish you for using extra cards. And finally, all of your tech cards also may not be applicable to every matchup. Be ready to side in and out all of your tech cards in any given matchup. For the purposes of this video, we put together a sample side deck to use for an event. In front of you, we have Sword Dance of the Demon God, a couple Koitsukais, a Begrudging Allies, a couple Crowns, a Violent Rays, a couple Shoes, King Vegeta Hidden Ambitions, a couple Wolfang Fists, and a couple Deborah Ritual at Hand. Together, these cards cover the gamut of gameplay mechanics that you're going to want to deal with throughout the meta. Koitsukai, typically for decks that play on your turn. Begrudging Allies, typically for decks with battle card counter-attack floodgates. Broly Crown of Retribution, typically for decks that leave up multiple energy passing your turn. Violent Rays, typically for decks that attack with 30k or higher battle cards frequently. Shu King Piccolo's Underlings, typically for decks that have counter-attacks floodgates that are 5k or less, or key pieces in their decks and key plays that require playing 5k power battle cards. King Vegeta Hidden Ambitions, typically used against decks that try to sparking their 1-mana negates or find an alternate way to play their 1-mana counterattacks. And Deborah Ritual Hand, typically used for decks that force you to discard cards. Wolfang Fist, typically used for decks that are low to the ground and go wide. And finally, Sword Dance of the Demon God is a special tech that I'm trying to make it so that we can keep our skill lists in matchups where they are frequently banished. So while these red cards may not apply to every deck that you're playing, Some of these black cards might, or variants of these red cards may exist in other colors. And at the end of this video, we're going to talk about some popular side deck choices for other colors. When side decking, you're going to want to think of the meta that you're playing into. So before us, I have laid out 5 decks, one of each color, for what I think is currently the top dogs in the meta. When you're at home, or the night before a tournament, I implore you to try practicing this. Sit down, either write down or visualize the 5 decks that you most likely will go against, and then build your side deck to match against those 5. Once you've built your side deck, do as I'm about to do. Actually side in and out for your deck versus those decks, even if you're not about to play versus them. This will allow you to practice side decking, give you the confidence of knowing that you're bringing the right amount of cards with you to a tournament without just throwing cards in your deck and then figuring it out at the event. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about it. If we're going to side deck versus Cell, Return of the Ultimate Lifeform, we're going to want to, 1, identify what that deck is trying to do, and 2, identify that deck's weakness. And if we can find cards that either counter what this deck is trying to do or take advantage of this deck's weakness, we will put those cards into our side deck. So, as with most screen decks, Cell Return of the Ultimate Lifeform does focus on at least a minimal amount of card disruption from your hand disruption. So, for that reason, we bring in Deborah Ritual at Hand to counter the hand destruction strategy. As with most green decks, it typically relies on Dormant Potential Unleashed, or if it's a green sand deck, Uneasing Awakened Rage. Both cards can be played without paying for their energy cost. So typically we will bring in King Vegeta Hidden Ambitions to counter that final defense. For me, in this deck, that's enough to beat this deck. Their boss monster is of no use, typically because we'll have a negate, and then when their boss monster has us discard a card, we'll just discard Deborah. In terms of aggression, I think we have the upper hand. So now we'll practice actually pulling cards out from our deck. As we go through our deck, we notice that they don't have cards that are higher than 25k in their deck, other than that one boss monster, so typically we won't need Master Roshi's Virtuoso. They don't go very wide, so we can consider siding that card out. Finally, they are a green deck, so they do rough up unisons pretty quickly, so we can consider bringing our baby count down to 3. This would be a great side deck in and out for me at a tournament for this matchup. And therefore, by practicing this, I know when I sit down across this match, I can immediately perform this action and not have to worry about it. Next, we'll move on to SS4 Vegito, Sparking Potara Warrior, the preeminent black deck of the format. This deck focuses on bringing up a 6-drop barrier double strike that then restands at the end of the turn to be a blocker. It focuses on warping my battle cards. Its weaknesses are that its hand size is quite small, but its main boss monster is a barrier boss monster. So thinking about that, we'll go into our side deck. We're bringing in the Sword Dance of the Demon God because they do warp our Skillless, and that is how they slowly grind us out of the game. By using the Sword Dance of the Demon God, we can try to recur some of those warped Skillless. We'll bring in 1 copy of Violent Rays, giving us a 5th Floodgate versus this deck. Since their big boss monster is a 30k, and some of their other finishers, like their SCR, also are over 30k, so this might buy us some time in the match. Given my side deck, these are the only cards I'm willing to bring in. Now, let's talk about what we're going to take out of the main deck. So, unlike last time, we can't just take these 3 cards out. Master Roshi does affect this deck since most of their attackers are 25k or higher, and King Vegeta Imposing Presence is a great floodgate for decks that can go wide, with many attacks. SS4 Vegito Sparking Potara Warrior does typically push 4 or 5 attacks in a turn. Given that their boss monster has barrier, and the rest of their deck is overrun focused, we probably don't have many targets for baby juvenile parasites, so we'll go ahead and trim this card down by 1. The second biggest threat in that deck is a counterplay that warps 5 drops or less, so we can't imagine our Pan Grandfather Strength is going to survive long enough to get any value. Therefore, these are going to be the 2 cards we're going to take out, and these will be the 2 cards we put in. Very simple. Now when I sit down across from this match, I'll have no problems quickly siding in and out. Moving on to Son Goku, Autonomous Awakening. Typically a very defensive-heavy deck that plays floodgates on your turn, such as the Bardock Floodgate, or the Vegito Floodgate, and sometimes even the Riposte Floodgate, finishing the game ultimately with a Limited to 1 multiple Awakening Sun Goku. The Awakening Sun Goku is a 30k or higher, so we'll bring in the Violent Rays just in the off chance that we have the 1 energy to prevent it from beating us. And they do play battle cards on our turn, and those battle cards are typically a battle card floodgate. Therefore, this is what I'm willing to bring in with them. Notably, I did side a third Koitsukai. If I have the extra space and I find dead cards in my main deck, I will bring in the third Koitsukai. However, bringing too many off-color cards into your deck may ruin the consistency of your deck. Once again, we will keep in the Master Roshi because their finishing battle card is about the same effect as Violent Ray would have. They cannot check unisons very quickly, so we are comfortable bringing the baby unison down by 1. They already generate an insane amount of pressure, so we might want to consider trimming cards like the Videl down to 2, since they don't have their 20k battle card that's important for the deck has barrier, and Videl is unable to hit that card. We might consider taking out Pan's Grandfather's Strength, as this card might not get more value than just 1 card, since they're very good at removing cards before they start combat. And we might even consider removing this tech Flight of the Grand Eagle, which is typically in here just for the Vegito SCR counter. That way we don't just die to that card. Or to Victory Strike. But if you suspect your opponent is playing Victory Strike on U7, you might want to keep this card and trade out a different counter attack for it. Dealer's choice. Moving on to Tapion, Revived in the Present. Tapion Revived in the Present, their entire engine revolves around them playing battle cards. Up to 2 battle cards on both players' turn. That way they can start drawing. So we're going to want to prevent that engine from going off. That way we can start outvaluing the deck. Their attacker slides just below Violent Rays, so we won't be able to use Violent Rays. And then there is almost no efficient way to stop Beaston. So we're going to attack their engine with cards like Begrudging Ally, Koitsukais, and Shu King Piccolo's Underling. If you have extra space, feel free to side in the Broly Crowns of Retribution, though typically in my experience, Tapion does not leave 2 energy up going into its opponent's turn. Versus the Tapion matchup, we want hard counter attacks. Tapion loves getting into the combo step, so we want to take out any soft counter attacks, such as King Vegeta's Imposing Presence and this Master Roshi. They don't typically have a super tall attack to end the game, so we're going to go ahead and remove our Flight of the Grand Eagle. Plus, if Beaston comes down, it's going to bounce your board before you can use Flight of the Grand Eagle anyway. Given that they use Majin Buu to set up their Z Energy, and they're not a Z Energy reliant Awakening deck, we can go ahead and cut the Broly Omens of Evolution for this matchup. And finally, as usual, if we have no other thing to take out, but we have a 6th card that we want to put in, we can take one of our extra cards out, like our 4th Baby Unison, or possibly even our 3rd Videl. And finally, the Mirror Match. If you're playing a Tier 1 deck, you should expect to see the Mirror Match at least twice in an event. And if you think you're playing the best deck in the room, you should probably expect to see the Mirror Match at least half of the rounds you're going to play throughout the event. For this format, we believe Son Goku face-off with the Demon King is the deck to beat. Therefore, we have sided quite heavily into this matchup. This deck relies on playing 30k battle cards to beat you in. They play cards on both players' turns, and for 0 energy. Therefore, we're going to use Shu's King Piccolo's Underlings to counterplay those cards that create free advantage like Chaozu and Bulma. We're going to use Koitsukai to hinder their ability to play cards on both players' turns for free advantage. And we're going to go ahead and use Violent Rays to curb some of those 30k attackers. As for siding out, we won't side out the 4th baby in this matchup because being able to tuck a baby unison underneath a baby unison on the turn you develop him, which is turn 3, gives you an enormous advantage in this mirror match. This is typically why we're playing the 4th baby to begin with. We're keeping Flight of the Grand Eagle because it gives us an out to SS4 Vegito. Master Roshi stays in. This Imposing Presence comes out. The battle cards are already 30k as we mentioned, so typically they won't get to do anything. The 3rd Videl can come out. The cards coming down are 30ks. Grandfather's Strength can also come out. This card will never get to trigger on your opponent's turn. Being a 15k, they just have to sneeze to be able to remove this card before they start playing the game. 1 copy of Testing the Opposition. Knowing that we are siding in Koitsukais, we can almost correctly assume that our opponent will also be siding in Koitsukai. So we don't want to weaken ourselves and open ourselves to only have defense available under Koitsukai for this matchup. And finally, if we have nothing else to side out, but we must make our 6-card side out, we'll take out a couple tech cards. These tech cards are not typically as useful in this matchup because there will almost always be a 30k on the field. We chose to play this tech card to make sure we can develop our own 30k into an empty board. As you noticed, we didn't use our entire side deck, even though we practiced for this meta. While some of the decks are in this meta, you can consider tier 1.5 or other tier 1 decks. For example, the blue boo deck are why we would bring something like the Wolffang Fist to kill a 15k before they can attack, before they can get full value. Or the Broly Crown of Retribution. This is a respect to decks like Hatchiyak or Bulma, or decks that do leave multiple energy up. You don't want to just straight up lose to those and not have a way to play around. Or if you're concerned about the cooler mill deck going in your tournament, that's why you would bring triple Koitsukai. I hope this intro into side decking was really helpful into showing you the idea and thought process behind side decking for a competitive event. Now that we've talked about side decking from the perspective of Red Kiku for this format, let's talk about some generic sideboard choices and sideboard choices for other colors in this game. Generically, and popular in this format, is Heavenly Wizard Demigra. This card allows you to bypass quickly in the early game the 30k barrier card in SS4 Vegeta Sparking Potara Warrior. Also, if you're going to sit down against Yellow Sin, this is a great way to get rid of their 9-drop or 8-drop 30ks if you're struggling in the early game. Hunt of the Demon God is a great way to generically counter those sparking 1 energy counter attacks, starting on turn 4, assuming you're playing a fully monocolored deck. And Black Smoke Dragon, Accumulated Negativity, is a great way to deal with barrier cards if you have no other way to deal with barrier cards. Additionally, it doubles as unison removal for any unison that's a specified 2-drop or less, as long as they have 7 or more markers on the card. Going into color-specific side deck options, for green, we have SS Vegeta Majin Exterminator for hand destruction. When this card is discarded, you can play this card and draw a card without paying its energy cost. We have Son Gohan Latin Power and Unleashed. This card's great for getting rid of unisons in the early game, especially versus decks like SS4 Vegeta Sparking Potara Warrior, or versus the green Nameku that's being recently played. Both of those decks heavily rely on a unison to get their game plan going, and in the early game, if you have this card in your hand, you can get rid of those unisons before they can even get going. Fusion Space Pirate Psychic, it's a great option for counter-playing those counter-attack floodgates that exist in battle card form. So stuff like Defending Friends, Topo, Mecha Riposte, the Bardock, the Vegito Overwhelming Might. This card's a great 1 energy answer to all of those cards. And Cell Pursuit of Despair. In case you couldn't afford Son Gohan Latin Power Unleashed, Cell Pursuit of Despair is an alternate card to get rid of unisons quite quickly for just 2 energy. Additionally, it also comes on a 30k double strike body. If you're looking for additional ideas in black, we can look at Ultimate minus Energy Powerball to get rid of those 15k barrier battle cards as a counterattack. And if you control unison like you do in this deck, you can play this card for free, much like Wolffang Fist. This is great versus decks like the blue Majin Buu. With cards like the Supreme Kai of Time, Time Labyrinth Unleashed, this is great as a battle card negate. Meaning, if your opponent plays stuff like Absolute Annihilation in the yellow deck, where they won't allow you to play an extra card without having an extra energy ready, you can have this counterattack ready to warp away their ultimate finisher, or any SCR. Super Kamehamehas. This is about the preeminent black counterplay for those battle card floodgates, such as aforementioned Defending Friends or Riposte, and so forth. And Petrification. This is a great side deck card versus green right now, as your opponent will have to pay 2 energy to play Father-Son Solidarity, and you'll pay 1 energy and 1 card to stop that play completely. You would have lost the card anyway, and this way you can stop the double strike. Talking about yellow side deck choices in today's format. Son Gohan Trusted Ally, similar to the Majin Exterminator in that this is a great card to curb against hand destruction. When this card is discarded by your opponent's skill, you'll just play this card for free and you'll draw a card. Mutaito, a great way to tap down bombs in this deck, or in this game, for 1 of your own energy, as long as the bomb being played by your opponent is higher than their energy requirement, you can tap that card before that card actually gets an attack. So cards such as Tapion's Boss Monster, uh, Green's Father-Son Solidarity, and many other 8-drops to come for the rest of the time. Notably, though, if they have a way to interact with this card before you can sacrifice the Mutato for its auto, Mutato will not tap down that card. Piccolo Demonic Transformation, a great card to stop Unisons, and one of the few cards left in this game that counterplays Unisons as they come in. It reduces itself to 2 during your opponent's turn, and then if the card being played has cost 4 or less, it comes in without its skill, or comes in with its skills negated. That means Boo won't be able to restand in energy or draw a card. That means Baby Unison won't be able to take one of your cards or draw a card or get a second marker underneath. That's huge, or become a 20k attacker. So if your opponent's reliant on Unisons for their strategy, big Unisons, consider trying Piccolo Demonic Transformation. Son Goku Steadfast Assistance. Typically in yellow side decks right now for the U7 Victory Strike card. This is a great way to deal with that U7 Victory Strike card as it's coming into play. And 1 copy of Great Ape Baby Golden Rage. It doesn't have to be played at 1 copy, but this yellow card is great in this format given that we have a bunch of skillless cards running around. This can blank up to 2 of your opponent's creatures and then applies a lingering effect to the game where your opponent during their next turn will not be able to attack with any cards that don't have skills. And then finally, going into blue, we have God Slicing Black Kamehameha. This is a great way to counter play those battle card floodgates. Especially if you control Unison, you can actually activate this card for free by bottom decking 2 cards instead. And then it actually draws for being played. Oh, discarding them, apologies. You have to discard the 2 cards, not bottom deck. And then it draws after it resolves. This is one of the few counterplays that also hits 4 drops and less. So that includes stuff such as Full Power Counter from the Android 21 deck. Afterwards, we have a new floodgate that's back in the game, SS2 Trunks Heroic Prospect. There are maybe 8 or 9 printings of this card, so they're probably still pretty cheap. But given that blue has such a great access to Unisons from the Z deck now, this card is more alive than ever. It's a nice 1 energy floodgate that punishes your opponents when they try to attack with battle cards higher than their energy. In this format, it's really great against the SS4 Vegito deck, since all of their cards are typically higher than their energy cost. Tapion Savior from Another Time, another great side deck choice for hitting cards that absolutely need their skills removed. So this includes the Gogeta SCR from the blue-yellow Gogeta deck, or if you're playing against green and you're concerned that they're going to play the 8-drop Namek Son Goku that costs 4 and will wipe the board, and then if you try to remove it from skills, you have to discard 3. Playing this card for 3 and then using the -2, you can blank the skills on either of those cards and eat them up without them getting to trigger any skills. And then, of course, Absolute Release Ball, just a cheaper version in terms of hard mana cost of the God Slicing Black Kamehameha. It lets you counterplay any battle card with cost of 3 or less. And then it also untaps energy. And if you happen to be playing a multicolored deck and you have 4 or less life, you can actually activate this card by just taking a life. That way you actually get a hard energy back. These are just ideas of side deck cards. But remember, the principles of side decking don't change depending on how the format moves. You're looking at cards that counter your opponent's best plays and looking for cards that take advantage of your opponent's weaknesses. I hope this video was informative and helpful to everybody looking to get better at the competitive side of Dragon Ball Super Masters. I will catch you next time.